Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and from the comfort of your homes or offices, please take your seats and welcome to the final edition of the DGS webinar series, Contracting with the California State Government, in partnership with DGS. This webinar is tailored for certified small businesses who are registered on Cal eProcure and are looking to expand business opportunities and work with the state of California. This will feature a live Q&A, get answers to your questions, and learn how to maximize your contract opportunities with the state. Before we begin, here are some housekeeping items. Please utilize the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit questions to the speakers and panelists if time permits. The session will have live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. To access this feature, please select the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. If you have any technical questions, please call 916-444-2221. Again, the number to dial is 916-444-2221. Please welcome to the webinar stage the Department of General Services Business Outreach Liaison, Jermaine Carter Gibson.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining part 3 of our 3-part webinar series, Contracting with California State Government. As she explained, my name is Jermaine Carter Gibson, Business Outreach Liaison with the California Department of General Services. Before we get started, how many of you have seen part 1 or part 2 of this webinar series? Put yes in chat if you've seen part 1 or part 2, whether live or on YouTube. Awesome. Awesome. Now, if you haven't had a chance to see part 1 or part 2, because all of these webinars build on each other, they are available on the YouTube channel, and that has been sent out, if I'm not mistaken. So if you haven't seen part 1 or part 2, make sure to go to the YouTube channel to check that out. Okay. Before we get started also, I'm so glad to have you all here, and we understand that the pandemic has been difficult, and we also understand that Zoom fatigue can be a real thing. So we absolutely appreciate you all joining this morning. And I don't know about you, but the music at the beginning is one of my favorite parts. So thank you so much for that. All right, so let's dive in. What are we going to cover today? Today, we're going to cover how the state buys, which will cover contracts exempt from advertising, leverage procurement agreements, and other procurement methods. We will talk about contract readiness. We'll talk about common mistakes, some tips for success, commercially useful function, and resources that we recommend. I am also going to try to speak slowly for everyone using the interpretation services. All right, so let's dig right in. First, how the state buys. So we all know that the state expends taxpayer dollars, which is influenced by rules, regulations, and laws that result in acquisition methods. So acquisition methods are distinct processes and procedures for purchasing a good or service. This is influenced by what is being purchased, for how much money, and some additional conditions. Now, when we talked in the previous webinar about doing your market research and looking at past purchases, one of those columns was acquisition method. So we're going to talk about these acquisition methods that will give you a little more information as you're doing your market research. So I really want you to focus on the definitions and what they mean, so that as you are doing your market research, you can understand the way that things are being purchased. Okay. Contracts exempt from advertising. These contracts are not publicly advertised on the Cal eProcure website. There are no system notifications from Cali Procure to let you know that this opportunity is available. It's an informal bidding process where the buyers contact the businesses that they think can fulfill the contract. And the buyers are going to search on Cali Procure. For this reason, you must have a robust and accurate profile on Cali Procure. So when we talked before about updating your profile, and we talked about keywords and UNSPSC codes being vitally important, this is one of the reasons, because not everything is going to go on the website and you won't get notified about everything. Sometimes the opportunities have to find you, and having an accurate, robust profile is how that happens, okay? Now let's talk about the first type. The first type is fair and reasonable. These are for purchases that are less than $10,000. These are used for simple purchases. Buyers just need one quote. It can be awarded to the lowest bidder, and the awardee can be a small business, a DVBE, or a non-certified firm. So an example of this would be, we do state agency recognition awards every year. And we had to find a photographer. And so we went into the database, we searched for photographers, we found one, reached out, got a quote, it was reasonable. And so we made a purchasing decision. So that's an example of a fair and reasonable purchase where it wasn't advertised on the website. Okay. Next, we'll talk about the SB DVBE option. We talked about this in the previous webinar. These are for procurements that are within 5,000 up to 250,000 minus a penny, and up to 333,000 for public works contracts. These are only for certified small business and DVBEs. Those are the only ones who are eligible. It requires 2 quotes from either 2 SBs or 2 DVBEs. You can't mix and match. We can't have 1 and 1. We have to have 2, at least 2 of each certification type, and it will be awarded to the lowest bidder. So the small business DVBE option, if you remember, is one of the benefits of being certified, because these don't go to the public. We go straight to certified firms, and it lowers the competition pool, okay? The next set of contracts that are exempt for advertising are our emergency purchases. We talked about this in the previous webinars as well. An emergency purchase is defined as a sudden, unexpected occurrence that poses a clear and imminent danger, requiring immediate action to prevent or mitigate the loss of impairment of life, health, property, or essential public services. Departments may contract for emergencies regardless of dollar limits, but must adhere to the purchasing processes applicable to the classification of the emergency. If you're interested in emergency work, we will cover this again later on in the webinar, but one of the ways you can contact the advocate of the departments that you would like to work with and let them know. And you definitely want to be prepared to perform work in unusual and unexpected circumstances, and possibly without a written contract. Emergencies would be like COVID-19, be like wildfires. Those have been the biggest emergencies that we have seen lately. So that is a batch of purchasing methods that are exempt from advertising. Are there any questions in that section?
Thank you, Jermaine. No permanent questions. Reka does ask if they will get a copy of the slides. Yes, later on this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow morning, once we get approval from DGS, we will be sending out the slides and the recording of this webinar as well. So be on the lookout for that. It'll be coming from my email, Alex, that is. But besides that, I see no other questions. You're good to go, Jermaine.
Awesome, thank you, Alex. And I mentioned the YouTube channel earlier. That's the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's YouTube channel, where you can find 1 and 2 of this webinar series.
Actually, Jermaine, we just had a question pop in.
Okay.
So James Ford asked, is bonding required for those?
Is bonding required? It's going to say in the specific solicitation if bonding is required. So it's not a yes or no across the board, but in the event package, it will specifically say if bonding is required or not.
Perfect. That is all questions.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. Keep them coming. All right. So next, we're going to dive into the different types of leverage procurement agreements. Now, it's a lot here, right? This is primarily for you to know that they exist, know the definitions, and to understand when you're searching for contracts and you see these acronyms, then you'll kind of know what they're looking for, okay? So we're not expecting you to be an expert on each one of these agreements after this section, but it's to get you used to it and get you familiar with the acronyms and the words, okay? So no pressure on yourself to be an expert. So number one, we talked about this before, it's the California Multiple Award Schedule, also known as CMAS. Before we dig in, leverage procurement agreements allow departments to buy directly from suppliers through existing contracts and agreements. So LPAs are available to California state, county, city, special districts, education, and other governmental entities, okay? So CMAS. So CMAS is used for a wide variety of commodities, non-IT services, information technology products at prices that are assessed to be fair and reasonable and competitive. And so it creates a pool of suppliers that an agency can solicit to for different opportunities. CMAS agreements are based on the federal GSA schedule. Examples of this would be like software, IT services, training. I worked with a business that does Lean Six Sigma training, and they needed to be on a CMAS schedule for those opportunities. So when you're looking for past purchases, if you see acquisition method is CMAS on all of the purchases, you know that you have to get on a CMAS schedule to be able to have access to those opportunities, okay? Next is cooperative agreements. Cooperative agreements are multi-state cooperative agreements for information technology and non-IT services. They're available for use by state and local government entities. You will see those listed. Being that it's multi-state, it's typically not going to be something that is going to be available to you. Master service agreements, the MSAs. These are contracts that are competitively bid by DGS and available to any agency that expends public funds. These types of agreements establish a pre-qualified list of vendors and simplify the purchasing process for the end user. So some examples here are like electronic payment acceptance services, office moving services. These are things that the entire state can access whenever they need these types of services. Next are statewide commodity contracts. Again, this is a streamlined process for departments that buy repetitive goods. I've seen examples of these like asphalt concrete, pharmaceuticals, Dell and HP computers. All of these are on statewide commodity contracts. And last, there's our software licensing program, which is an extensive software discounts are negotiated with the major software publishers that are then passed on to the state through our software licensing program. Okay, so these are the leverage procurement agreement types. Now, if you would like to dig into those and find out, where they are, when they're coming up, on our website, the Find Public Procurement information, you can do a search for leverage procurement agreements of each type, and you can find each type, find who's on them, and find the specific information for each individual leverage procurement agreement. And here's also a link to the DGS page that has a list of leverage procurements as well. That's dgs.ca.gov/PD-LPA. Any questions on leverage procurement agreements, what they mean, how they're used, anything like that?
None currently right now, Jermaine. It looks like Lucianne is handling some folks directly, sending them messages. I don't know if you want to thank her for that.
Of course, Lucianne is amazing. Thank you so much, Lucianne, for having my back.
No current questions at this time.
All right. Now, so when you're looking for contracting opportunities, you may start to see some of these words. You'll start to see some of these acronyms and some of these words. And so now it's time to give you some definitions as to what these mean. When you're doing your searches, you'll know exactly what they're looking for. So a request for quotation, or an RFQ, is used most commonly for informal competitive solicitations. So when this is going to list exactly what is needed by item, quantity, and price. So they're going to absolutely know what they're looking for. And the dollar threshold is generally up to $100,000. So this is typically straightforward. They need a quote. They need more information. Let's see. So contracts awarded in this type of procurement method will be to the responsible bidder that submits a responsive bid that is the lowest cost after the application of any of the preferences. So we talked about the small business preference, DVBE preference. All of those will be applied in this type of procurement method. Okay. Next is a request for information, also known as an RFI. So an RFI is typically used when there's an excessively large pool of interested suppliers. And so this is going to help the buyers create a formal solicitation and establish the mailing list for the buyers to use when distributing the solicitation. So it may be used to survey the marketplace, to get an understanding of the products and services that are available, to project the dollars that may be needed for the procurement. And the RFI can also be referred to as a request for interest. So at this point, they don't exactly know what they're looking for. They know they have a problem. And so they're going to put this request for information out to survey the marketplace so they can then create the actual solicitation with more information from the market, and then that will go live. All right. Next, you have an invitation for bid. So this is used to obtain simple, common, and routine services. Up to 100,000, typically the award goes to the lowest bidder. There's no discussions or negotiations in these situations. Price is key, and the small business preference and DVBE incentive will be applied. Lastly is the request for proposal. So this is used to obtain complex services in which professional expertise is needed. It's a more rigorous evaluation process of the bidders. The RFPs are awarded based on a weighted criteria that is identified in the bid package. So your bid package is going to identify the criteria in which they're going to use to make a purchasing decision. The RFP award can be set before advertising as either primary low cost and secondary best value. It's going to be formally advertised on the Cali Procure website. Excuse me. So low price is not the only determining factor in this situation. If they can get a better value at a potentially higher price, that will be considered as well. Okay. So as you are looking through these opportunities and you see these words and these acronyms, I want you to refer back to this information as to what that exactly means, what they're looking for, so that you'll know how to respond. Okay. Any questions on acquisition methods?
We do have, I believe I see two questions here. One, are statewide commodities opportunities granted on a competitive basis?
Our statewide commodity opportunities. So the way I read competitive basis would be as they're going to go out and competitively bid, and then whoever has the lowest price is going to win. In this situation, the pricing has already been identified. So it's really not a competitive, who's got the lowest price. It's already been established. So they just kind of go to the schedule and buy off the schedule. So to get on the schedule, the pricing is pretty much already determined as well, unless you have better pricing than is what is already stipulated.
Thank you. And we have another one from Tamara Ruiz here. Is there any way we as subs can advertise our services to primes on these RFP packages?
Is there it's a great question. I'm not sure if there is a vendor ad option when these go live, because they're not listed the same as the regular solicitations. So I'm not 100% sure. I will look into that for you and circle back. I'm not going to make it up. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen it, but I'm not aware if it's possible. But it doesn't happen often.
Okay. Another one, is there a YouTube video or any other service on the process to file for and obtain a master services agreement? So any help, I guess, is what they're asking.
So on our resources channel, we do have, and this is through the Cali Procure website. If you go to the resources section, you can find documents on this information. You can find contact information for like CMAS, for example, and the other offices. I don't know if we've created an actual YouTube video yet, but there's definitely resources about each of the contracting methods, or each of these procurement methods is available, and there's contact information as well.
We have actually an interesting question from Luis here as well. How important are the contract officers in the procurement process? What is the best way to cultivate a relationship?
So the best way to cultivate a relationship with a department is going to be through the small business advocate. So typically what you're going to find is that the buyers themselves don't typically engage with the public a lot, especially when there's not an active opportunity. So when you do your research on past purchases, it will say the buyer's name and email, right? But that's not going to be the person that you want to build a relationship with. Excuse me. You're going to want to work through the small business advocate, whose part of their job is to advocate on your behalf. So the buyers themselves will respond in an active solicitation situation where you're asking a specific question. But as far as building a relationship so that when the next opportunity comes up, you're top of mind, all of that is going to go through the small business advocate. And in the last webinar, we talked about how to find the list of advocates through the website. So I would definitely recommend referring back to that PowerPoint presentation and YouTube video to get that list, because those are going to be who to build a relationship with.
Thank you, Jermaine. It looks like Lucianne's answering Nathan's questions. Ruben has a question. How does one secure a meeting to introduce DGS to a new product regarding COVID or other microbiome surfaces?
I would do that through the advocate as well. I would start with the advocate, explain to them that you have a new solution, and then they would facilitate the forwarding that to the right person. So in the way, it may not only be DGS, for example, like you may have a solution that another department may want to use as well. And so it's part of the advocate's responsibility to take that inquiry and kind of point you in the right direction. So you would want to start with the advocate for that.
Perfect. No more current questions, Jermaine. You're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you all. Great questions. All right, so now we're going to talk about contract readiness. So these are going to be a few questions that you want to ask yourself before entering into a contract. Consider if you actually can perform. So can I deliver on this contract? Can I do what is being asked, right? Is the first question that you're going to want to ask yourself. Next, do I meet the minimum requirements? Do I have the financial capacity to meet these obligations? These 3 questions are really important. You don't want to waste your time on opportunities that you can't fulfill. And you also want to check off these questions before you get deep into it, because past performance is really important in state contracting. So you don't want to take on a job that you can't handle, because that may hurt you moving forward. Okay. Determine your eligibility. So can you meet the evaluation criteria? So past performance is one, required experience and skill sets, production capabilities, all of those are going to be outlined in the bid package. Another thing for contract readiness, you want to keep your SB DVBE profile information up to date to ensure you receive important information. You don't want to miss out on any business opportunities by letting your certification lapse. I'll be honest with you, managing the dates of the expiration of your certification is up to you. You can recertify up to 90 days prior to the expiration, but no one is going to be giving you phone calls and emails that you're expired, right? So it is up to you to manage those dates. You also want to make sure that you're properly licensed and insured in your field of discipline. And anyone who is not on mute, please put yourself on mute. Thank you so much. All right, common mistakes made by our SBs and DVBEs according to advocates. So we talked to the advocates whose job is to build the relationships that we talked about, right? And we asked them, what are some of the common mistakes that our suppliers are making that are making it difficult for them to have success? And this is a list that they've given us of common mistakes. So we want to pay attention to this list and not make these same mistakes. Number 1, forgetting to sign all documents. Every document that needs a signature needs a signature. We know the evaluation process for the state is pretty black and white. If you don't give them exactly what they asked for, you're a non-responsive bidder and won't be considered, okay? Forgetting to return all requested documentation and forms. Not responding by the deadline. Like we talked about, the date and time is a hard stop. If you don't get your bid in before that date and time, you are a non-responsive bidder. Ignoring historical information available for pricing. So doing your research on past purchases to get an idea of what the state has spent, the price that they've paid for your goods and services in the past. Ignoring that can make it to where you're not pricing in a range that is comparable to what the state is expecting to spend, which can be a problem. Incorrect calculations of tax rate, etc. on documents. You want to double check your math as you're making your calculations for each thing that you're providing. You want to make sure that all of your calculations are correct. Leaving out required permits, licenses, or bonding. There was a question about bonding earlier. So if that is a requirement of the opportunity, make sure that you're not leaving out anything that is asked for. Substituting items without the consent of the issuing department. So if you say you're going to provide a particular brand, you can't substitute that with a different brand without getting approval, okay? Not following all directions on the solicitation, that's kind of simple. And not filling out the recycled content form. There's a recycled content form that asks, is any of the goods, let's say, that you're providing have recycled content? And a lot of times if the answer is no, a supplier will think, well, I don't need to submit that because the answer was no. I should only have to submit it if the answer is yes. And that's not the case. Whether the answer is yes or no, submit the form, okay? and submitting cost proposal in the same package as technical requirements. If it specifies that those should be separate, you want to make sure they're separate. So the common theme in all of this is really following the instructions, right? Taking your time with the bid package and following the instructions. Some tips for success: ask questions early and often. Do not wait until the last minute or after the bid due date to ask your questions. So if you're not sure about something, if you need clarification, you definitely want to ask your questions early and often to the contact person on the solicitation. Get that out of the way early. You don't want to be up against the clock, because we know if we submit after the date and time, we're not a responsive bidder. You want to make sure that you read and understand the scope of work and requirements set forth in the solicitation. You want to read everything and make sure that you are clear on the expectations so there's no surprises moving forward. Additional tips for success after the post-bid award: if your business secures a state contract, you are legally bound to deliver as promised. We talked about this before, but it's good to reiterate. Many contracts do not pay until the job is completed. So for example, if you see lump sum, that means the invoice will be paid after the project or the phase is complete. This is really important. So you're not going to get a down payment up front typically, and the state has a certain amount of time after an undisputed invoice to be able to make their payment. So you, again, have to be able to float your cost from the time that you win the contract to execution of the contract to delivering of the invoice and to your prompt payment timeline. You've got to be able to float those costs as a business. So that's something that you're going to want to keep in mind when you're making these decisions on what contracts to pursue. You want to make sure that you have the financial capacity to be able to complete it all the way through. Okay. Any questions on contract readiness, of the common mistakes, any of the tips, or anything else that may have come to mind?
Thank you, Jermaine. I see Lucy Ann is answering a question right now. A question from Tamara. A lot of times when we reach out to the contract person, we do not get a response. Should we reach out to the advocates for assistance or make our best assumptions of what is being asked for?
So if this is as part of an existing opportunity, so a solicitation goes out and you have a question specifically to that solicitation, if you contact that person and they don't respond, then yes, the next person to contact is going to be the advocate. If you're contacting like a administrator off cycle, basically when they're not in an active solicitation, then more than likely they may not respond, because that's not their function to be customer service for the public. Their function is to be the buyer and execute on the contract. So the advocate is more the customer service for that department. So definitely, if you're not getting a response from the administrator, you want to reach out to the advocate to be able to make that contact.
Thank you, Jermaine. No current questions. If you are in our Spanish interpretation and have a question, please send your question to info@cahcc.com. We will get your question translated and over to the folks at DGS. You're good to go, Jermaine.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we're getting close, guys. So I know we've covered a lot of information. If you can still hear my voice, put yes in chat. If you can still hear my voice, put yes in chat. Some exclamation points will make me feel better. Yes, yes, you can still hear my voice. We're still together. Awesome. All right, thank you guys so much. Let's keep moving. So we've covered this before, but it's definitely worth covering again, is the SB DVBE Emergency Registry. And we definitely want you to register now if you are capable. So what is the registry? We'll cover this again. It is a dedicated portal for California certified businesses to register as a supplier of emergency goods and services. Unlike Cali Procure, this portal will only include businesses that provide goods and services for predetermined emergency categories. State Department buyers can access and search this pool of suppliers. So we talked about this before, but I need to tell you again, year over year, the state of California spent $2 billion with a B more dollars on emergencies than they did the year prior. This includes wildfires, COVID, and the like, right? There's a lot of opportunity here. And in that $2 billion, not enough of it went to you all, our certified firms. And so we've created this emergency registry for you so that the buyers can find you easily in the categories they're looking for, and we can more equitably disperse the opportunities, okay? So what businesses should sign up? So small businesses and DVBEs who are currently ready and able to support state of California in an emergency. Emergency contracting requires fast, around-the-clock turnaround times. A business should not register unless they are fully capable of immediately providing the goods or services that they list. Immediately. So this is a list of the categories. So let's say fire protection equipment. If you can't provide that immediately, if you have to place an order, it's going to come in 2 weeks, but you provide, this isn't for you. You have to be able to respond and have a quick, within 24-hour typically turnaround to be able to respond to these emergencies. Why am I going so slow and why am I hammering this? For this registry to be successful and for us to be able to equitably disperse this money across our small businesses, those in the registry have to be able to do the work, right? You have to be able to respond quickly. You have to have capacity. You have to be able to do the work. What happens if I'm a buyer and I go to this registry and I pick a firm and they can't respond to this fire in time? I may not go back, right? I may just go to these super large companies that we already done business with and we know they can execute. That's not going to be successful and not going to be beneficial for all of the small businesses of the state, right? So we want to be mindful and we want to be responsible when going to join the registry to make sure that we can actually do what we say we can do. Because this is very, very important for the citizens, for the state as a whole, and for all of the businesses that would like to be involved. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox, but it's really important. What you're going to need to get into the registry, you're going to need your certification number. So you have to be a certified firm already. The emergency categories that you can fulfill, description of the products and services, your business address, contact information, both primary, that's during business hours, and emergency, which is after hours. Emergencies don't work 8 to 5. So whenever they happen, we need to be able to contact our emergency suppliers, okay? It's a link to step-by-step instructions on how to access the registry, and you're gonna get this information. And if you have any additional questions, you can email SB-DVBE Emergency Registry at dgs.ca.gov. It's a great opportunity for firms that can respond quickly, and we're definitely looking for you, okay? One of our last topics, we've covered this every single time, commercially useful function, also known as CUF. You perform a commercially useful function if your business is doing and executing a distinct element of the work, performing, managing, or supervising the work, performing work that is normal for your firm's business and services functions, not subcontracting a portion of the work greater than expected by industry practices. I know those of you that have seen the first, you guys are tired of this, but it's very important to uphold the integrity of our certifications. Your business is not performing CUF if you are just an extra participant in a transaction, contract, or project through which funds are being passed through in order to obtain the appearance of an SB-DVBE participation. If you're not being used to perform the work as stipulated in the bid, and you're no longer being used to provide goods and services listed in the initial bid, like I told you guys before, if I'm just really good at finding contracts and really good at filling them out, and I find a plumbing opportunity for $50,000, and then I go find a plumber and pay him $40,000 and keep 10 for myself for doing my hard work of finding the opportunity, that's not a commercially useful function. I'm just an extra participant. I'm not actually doing the work, and that is not allowed. Okay. Any questions on any of that section?
Jermaine, no current questions. Lucianne has answered the two that were already there.
Awesome. Lucianne is amazing. All right. We are towards the end. We're going to talk about resources. First, your Chamber of Commerce that has brought you here today. They are amazing, and this is why we are partners. Additionally, we partner across the state with other centers, other resources. So for new businesses, the small business development centers are very helpful with business consulting, business planning, marketing, access to capital. All of those are free. If you're more of an established business, the PTACs, the Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, can help with government contracting, and also SCORE for newer businesses can help with business mentorship. They all partner with us, and they all offer free resources. Additional resources from us with the state of California, our DGS website for resources, and the website for the advocates. This is gonna, on the page, you'll be able to click and download an Excel spreadsheet of all of the advocates of all of the state departments with their own purchasing authority. And we've recently added contact information for advocates at all of the UCs because all of the UCs have now adopted our first policy of working with small businesses first, which we're really excited about. And that opens up the opportunities and opens up the more benefits of being a certified firm. All right. So now we're going to go over the review so we can talk about what we talked about, so we can jog your memory if you have any questions. So we talked about how the state buys. We talked about contracts that are exempt for advertising. We now know that there are a couple categories of things that are never going to go out to the public. So we now know that it's very important to update our profile, make sure our keywords and UNSPSC codes, our contact information, all of that is up to date. So for the contracts we can't find, they can find us. We talked about leverage procurement agreements and the other procurement methods. We talked about contract readiness, some of the common mistakes, some tips for success. And we talked about commercially useful function, and we talked about resources. Again, we love, 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 love success stories. We love it. So share your success stories with our group to our business outreach at dgs.ca.gov. These stories can be your first contract. This is all the way through, right? We want to hear from your very first piece of success after attending this webinar series to when you outgrow the certification and you're making more than $15 million a year and you can't even be considered a small business anymore because you've killed it at such a high level. We want to hear all of that, and we want to be able to highlight you along the way as you see success, okay? So make sure to reach out to us, business outreach at dgs.ca.gov. Also, we are on LinkedIn. Please follow us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn page is where the majority of our social media engagement happens. You'll be able to get updates on all the new stuff that's happening, whether it's webinars, whether it's opportunities for grants. There's a ton of information that goes out through the LinkedIn page. So please follow us on LinkedIn. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us for part 3 of the 3-part webinar series. We're going to open it up to any last questions, and then I'll give you guys our contact info.
Thank you, Jermaine. We're give it a second here for people to type their questions into the Q&A function. While they are waiting, we just want to thank everyone for joining us. We will let everybody know we will get an approved version of these slides to send to all attendees. We will also be uploading this to our CHCC YouTube channel. I will be putting the link in the chat here in a second, but everything will be on that channel as well. If you have any questions after this, please email us at info@cahcc.com. Moving on, it looks like we have a few questions here. Give me 1 second. Here we go. I have reached out to both CA advocates several times and cannot get a response. They both do not allow for, I'm sorry, Lucianne answered that.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Lucianne. Jermaine, if you want to give folks your contact info, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll actually put it in the chat because it's not on the slide. My direct email, jermaine.cartergibson@dgs.ca.gov. One of the last things I want to leave you all with is this. We all know information is power, right? And knowledge is power. But execution trumps knowledge every time. So for those of you that have gone through this 3-part series, you're fired up, you have all the information, it's time to execute. Execution trumps knowledge every time. Thank you guys so much.
And thank you all. We have one last question from James Ford. To confirm, SB general contractors can use subcontractors, just not for an emergency.
Correct.
Perfect.
If it is part of standard industry practices. So, and that's, that's part of the cuff, right? So if it's normal for your business to subcontract, if you're like a general contractor and you build buildings, and it's normal for you to get painters and people that do specialized things, then absolutely. But if it's not normal, if, for example, you bid to do plumbing, it's not normal for you to subcontract all the plumbing work, right? So yes, subcontractors are allowed as long as, you are also providing a distinct portion of the work.
Thank you. There are no further questions. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Jermaine. Thank you, Lucianne. And thank you, DGS, for providing this great information to our members and to small businesses. Everyone have a wonderful week, and we'll see you all at the next event. Thank you.